their hemp could be cultivated on the land here in Navajo Nation. At that time, I voted red for that legislation, and there were 3 reasons I voted red. The first is that this issue was brought before my chapter, Shiprock chapter, on one occasion. I believe it was in December of 2000 and December of 2000. Introduced to the Shiprock chapter. And at that time, the Shiprock chapter voted no. And so with that information, I was present at the chapter meeting. With that information, I voted red on the legislation. I also informed my colleagues and NAPI at the time that there was no proper education given to our people. And I felt that it was not right to vote green for that reason. We all have our various reasons for voting the way that we do, but that was the 2 reasons. The third reason was there was no regulations in place at that time. There were no regulations passed by the Navajo Nation Council that talked specifically about hemp. And so those were the 3 reasons that I thought that I voted red for that reason. And this is for hemp, period. The second legislation that came before the 24th Navajo Nation Council was this year's CMY-40-20. I voted red on that legislation. I voted red along with my colleague, Honorable Vince James, and we both agreed, again, that proper education of the difference between industrialized hemp and marijuana needed to be made. In addition to that, we also questioned the regulations on whether they had been put in place or not. And we were informed that there were no regulations, and for that reason, I could not vote green. So with the hemp issue as a whole, I did vote red on both occasions, and the Shiprock chapter heard resolutions on 2 different dates, and the Shiprock chapter voted red at that time not to allow hemp production here in the Shiprock community. And I stand by my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Charles Newton. Thank you, Chairman Nez. I know that we have an agenda before us, and we're going to be talking with individuals or listening to individuals. And up first, we have we're going to be talking about farming, boards, and permits on the Navajo Nation. So with that, I have Navajo Nation of Resources and Navajo Nation Department of Agriculture. Do I have anybody on the line from there? Mr. Shabala.
Navajo Nation Council.
Got they.
Yeah. That's enough. Beta do Diego Chon Ido Aro Anita Doi Piso Bed Aro Apiso Sahot Avis Hatelia E Chill E Sitna E Sanat O E what Agis Beta has Apo eben ebike says dito na the sahod ishi shai beshba ai ishi ni lekna lado ben kita hadni aro the neta isano tangi dawis ade do ni helek estalla ni hen khandel sto kodo ya at disjile behas anigi doctor what what aban that's the case I want to talk about this for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Shabali. Anybody be speaking Department of Agriculture?
Mr. Speaker, Leo Watchman, Department of Agriculture.
Yeah.
It's basically a farming permit under a designated control area. And that allows you to, under your, I guess, guidelines, one of the guidelines would be that you would have to provide a crop report and also maintain the area in which farm board that have been designated by the Navajo Nation. There's some are irrigated and some are non-irrigated. How this came to be, and you may not see a Navajo Nation farm plot or LMUP under regulations with the federal government, but under it's use of land. The BIA also monitors and assists with the use of those lands that could be transfer, someone dies, or probate, those kind of things, or non-use. So, having said that, basically are for use, and there's a restriction to that, and the restrictions are only for harvest, or only for planting and harvesting, not even grazing, unless or subleasing becomes another issue. So, having stated that, the ones that are in question, or basically they're all in question throughout the Navajo Nation because they're being they're a non-use. So there's two things that have come out with the hemp influence. I guess there's a number of farms that had been utilized, and there are a number of farms that have changed the use. So the application from the Navajo Nation is, get into use of these designated farms, and basically whatever you have control over, that you maintain that. So again, it is administered by a farm board. The farm board basically has authorities to transfer the permit or regulate, so save water, and beyond that, they're only a recommended body. So they only can recommend to the Bureau or recommend to RDC use. In this case, when it comes to hemp, the local county council, so the oversight is the RDC. Board gain any authority farm, but being outside of Navajo, that's has to be authorized by the Navajo Nation Council. Mr. Chair, if there's any other further definitions, and there are probably a number of them that I can go into regarding the THC levels and what the part of VAG has been trying to research on. An example would be the main issue that Navajo Nation would probably get to is that if we it's upon ourselves to probably a THC level beyond what the Navajo Nation allows or the federal government allows. So that's probably the main question when we are to develop any kind of rules and regulations. What will we do to discard any kind of harvesting? And that's a national issue as well. Most Native communities are fighting to, if there are in this type of industry, they're asking for exceptions because apparently the THC level rises after harvesting, and a lot of it should be discarded under rules and regulations per state, or in our case, that would probably be the same. So just a little highlight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Speaker? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Watchman. Colleagues, Chairman, Ned, Madam Chair, Charles Dillon, or Madam Chair Amber Carty, questions? Either Watchman.
Honorable Speaker Damon, this is Chair Rick Nez here.
Go ahead, Chairman.
I do have a question for Mr. Leo Watchman. I understand the farmlands, farm permits were issued by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And when they're issued these permits, what are the only products to be planted on these farms? And my other question is that you stated that the only authority to issue any type of approval would be the governing body of the Navajo Nation, which would be the Navajo Nation Council under the Resources and Development Committee, which is oversight over agriculture as well. Mr. Watchman.
Chairman. Mr. Watchman. The response, Chairman, is.
I will respond, Mr. Chair. Basically, it comes down to a farm permit. It allows you to grow native plants or crops. Hopefully that question a regulation or that we can expand that we haven't got there yet. Beyond that, when I mentioned that the oversight in terms of authority under the
Great. With that,
Honorable Speaker Damon, could I translate that in Navajo?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Corona das ketira hemp beochigo a con dag epicago kidateliegi ashbe hot hot anal sosiki farm permit is nenigi hail sosiki bakagi she hot abaka ti a conegos baka snow naidash kit nde shichana o zinde nela ti de agi e ha nda said that egi contene det lehen na ta of tanas anna is that egi hot you said that atenia hot abe hatat ako ti ha koro saho na dish kinden ke ha ti da koro board be so na khasara jot ya nat kha o zi na ako khwesto ti da kait aranal so khajdo listo na ge kenda na it jo no koro nat kha o zi le do le sto she
Good Springs, Indian Wells, Keystone, White Cone. And again, in that legislation, it did state that the purposes of doing this was to increase economic development on the nation. So even though the USDA allowed for industrial hemp to be legal, farmers to cultivate, the United States Department of Agriculture did require, and I quote,